Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Business Matters. I'm your host, Dr. Martin Lockstrom. So today we're going to talk a little bit about AI in education. So a lot of discussion recently, whether the use of AI by students in education is considered plagiarism. In order to answer that question, we have to take a look at what's the meaning, what's the definition of plagiarism. So basically, plagiarism means that um, you take credit for somebody else's work. In other words, you take credit for something that you haven't written or produced by yourself. So then, of course, the question is, when you use a software tool like ChatGPT to produce a text, does that constitute plagiarism? No, under the condition that you properly reference the original text, the original authors. And then we also have this frequent question, whether you should quote ChatGPT as a source. So then the question is, first of all, how should we consider ChatGPT? Uh, should we consider it as a person, as an entity? Is ChatGPT a source by itself? And I would say here the answer is no. ChatGPT is not a source. It's actually a more like a search engine or a content aggregator. So in that sense, we shouldn't quote or reference ChatGPT. But what is important is to quote the original sources. So, for instance, if you generate a text about, let's say, theory of relativity, then of course you should reference the original author, which in this case most likely should be Albert Einstein, right? Um, it doesn't really make sense to quote ChatGPT itself, especially not considering that in the future, pretty much all text will be generated by tools like ChatGPT and similar. People will not write texts like manually by hand. And by hand, I mean, typing on a computer. So that means that writing, or let's say authoring as a activity will increasingly become obsolete. So for instance, in academia, we see more and more the students, they're using AI tools like ChatGPT. And I think we have to be mindful about that. We need to be aware of that. We need to acknowledge that. We cannot pretend as if they didn't, right? Because if we don't do that, we'll just be fooling ourselves. And vice versa, increasingly. We as scholars will also increasingly use AI-based tools when it comes to marking and grading. That will also be a task, an activity which will become increasingly obsolete. And then you might argue that, well, it's one of the core tasks of an academic. We should apply our knowledge to mark and grade students, and many colleges and universities, you're not allowed to delegate this task even to teaching assistants or whatever. Even if you have a template, you're not allowed to delegate that. That it should be done by a professor. But personally, I don't see any point in this. If an AI-based tool can perform a task equally or better than a human being, even so-called qualified person, then the question is why should you do it? It doesn't make sense. Like logically, rationally speaking, it doesn't make sense. So having said that, we have to reconsider how we look at uh, learning in the first place. Uh, what kind of knowledge, skills, capabilities do we actually want to transfer to our students? And I think in the past was very much about uh, disseminating information, full frontal lecturing, and the lecturer just providing information, contents, and students they're sucking it up, right? And then we came to a phase where students should become more independent, right? So instead of just spoon feeding students with knowledge, they are given some, let's say, more loose boundaries, and then they're supposed to go out and search for information themselves, right? So in the past, that usually meant that students they had to go to the library, they had to borrow books and magazines and browse these through and extract information and synthesize that into something new. Um, and then came, the advent of information technologies, search engines, like Google and Bing, and here in China, Baidu, and so on and so forth. And today, most physical books can also be found in electronic version. Academic papers are all available via online these days. So nowadays, I mean, when students get an assignment, I doubt even a fraction or even, going to the library. I mean, the library today is basically just a place to find a seat and find some silence, right? Very few students go there to borrow any books. So I think library as such are also becoming increasingly obsolete. So what do students do today? Well, of course, they go online on their internet-enabled device, and then they search in electronic libraries for electronic books, and they search for, electronic articles and so on and so forth. Using search engines to basically, identify what's the most relevant literature in this area. And then they go through the similar process as well to synthesize information and come up with something which is reasonably original, right? Now today, with the emergence of AI-based tools like ChatGPT, you really don't really need search engines anymore either, because these tools basically do the search for you and distill that and aggregate into a form and shape that suits your needs. So having said that, um, that this whole task of searching for information and aggregating, distilling, processing information is basically becoming obsolete, right? So the question then is, what kind of tools and capabilities do we want to convey to our students? So basically, what it means is that everyone is like, stepping up one level of abstraction, basically. So everyone will do less of these more mundane, rudimentary tasks, and we are stepping up to a higher level of abstraction. So that basically means what do students need to learn today? Well, first of all, they need to learn, first of all, how to use AI-based tools. That's an absolutely essential skill. So I think that Colleges and universities that ban the use of AI tools, I think they are doing their students a huge disservice because these tools will become mainstream. It's unavoidable. And this is always the case with any new emergent technology. There's no one in history which has won the war against a new technology. Those that have been trying to resist and fight against new technologies, they have always failed, right? So the only thing we can do is to embrace these technologies, like this AI-based education tools, like ChatGPT, for instance, right? So we need to teach our students how to use these tools. We as academics, we need to learn how to use these tools as well, right? So we all need to learn how to use these tools. And when we know how to use these tools, we can become much more productive, probably by at least a factor of 10, at least. So what is important, of course, still, nevertheless, is critical thinking, because the output from these AI-based tools are not always perfect. So we need to teach students how to think critically, how to critically assess the output being generated from sources like ChatGPT. And we also need to teach the students, to still go out and find out and look up, the original sources that are provided by ChatGPT, and critically assess, are these the proper sources? Is the list of sources, complete that you attach to ChatGPT? So in that sense, as I said, we should look at tools like ChatGPT as a productivity tool, as a new generation of search engines, information aggregator, right? So that itself, ChatGPT should not be considered a source itself. It's just an aggregation of other external sources, right? So it's the same thing if you considering, many people that write books are using ghostwriters, for instance. Are these people actually quoting the ghostwriter? No, they don't, right? So it's the same thing here. You simply shouldn't quote ChatGPT. It's just a tool to aggregate information. Okay, so what we need to apply here is so-called meta learning. And this is actually the only thing students need to learn. Pretty much anything else that is being conveyed in terms of knowledge in the education system can actually be taught by the students themselves, right? But in order to teach yourself or learn by yourself, of course, you need the ability to learn by yourself, right? And this is what we refer to as meta learning, right? So meta learning basically means learning about learning. So the students need to learn how to learn. This is the only single capability we need to transfer to students in the entire education system from the very beginning until the very end. The rest is just like ancillary. It's fluff. Okay. It's meta learning also referred to as double loop learning by management scholar Chris Argyros, for instance. So learning about learning, that also basically means that we provide students with also the only single survival skill they need to have, right? And that's the same survival skill that we see in nature, right? It's the only survival skill we see in businesses, and that's the ability to adapt to a changing environment. It's the only survival skill you need. If you have that skill, if you have the ability to learn, you never have to attend any expensive programs or whatnot for the sake of learning. You don't attend school to learn. You attend school where the objective should be to learn how to learn. Of course, there are many other benefits of attending school or university, higher education, whatever. And that is to socialize, to improve your social skills. These are the kind of what we refer to as tacit knowledge that you cannot attain just by reading a book. You have to learning it by doing it, by practicing, by trial and error, right? Tacit knowledge. And other things like networking, for instance, meet new people, form relationships, increase, your self-confidence or something like that, speaking in front of audiences, these kind of things that are valuable of obtaining, in a classroom setting. But the rest, knowledge itself, reasonably intelligent people can learn by themselves. So I think having said that, we have now entered a new era, as I would call it. I would say we're in a fifth industrial revolution. So we now enter the fifth industrial revolution. The first one was about mass production system. Second one was mass production. The third one, automation. The fourth one, cyber physical system. Now we enter the fifth industrial revolution, fueled and driven by AI. And I would compare this invention to others. Most important inventions in the history of mankind, namely the wheel and electricity. It's of the same magnitude. So we simply have to get used to this. We cannot fight against it. So we need to embrace this technology and make the best use out of it. And use it to our advantage, right? And this is a little bit like, the so-called Rorschach test. With ink blots. If you look at ink blots, you can tell the psyche of a human being. Its simplified version is, the question, we know whether the glass is half empty or half full. So depending on how you look at it, you can see it either as an opportunity or as a threat. So what's the difference between opportunity and a threat? The only difference is how you perceive it. If you're able to properly respond to a change in the external environment, if you can properly respond to it, it's an opportunity. If you fail to properly respond to it, it becomes a threat. Threat to your wealth, to your livelihood, to your existence. So that's the whole thing here. How do we turn AI into an opportunity? And I think there are many good ways of doing it. And I think we first of all have to acknowledge that we can embrace it as an opportunity. And if we do that successfully, we'll all become more wealthy and ultimately more successful in the end. All right. So that's my little rant about AI for today. So thank you much for watching and stay tuned for the episodes ahead. Take care. Bye-bye.